Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the final EYN of the 2024-2025 Fantasy Premier League season. It's been an absolute pleasure to deliver these for you consistently every game week, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really do appreciate all your support. In today's edition of EYN, I have for you the mightily important topic that is captaincy. We have a look at the best forwards, mids, and defenders to buy, as well as some sales, including Alexander Isak potentially. And for those of you on the chip, free hit 38 as well. As previously said, it's been an absolute pleasure to do these for you each and every game week. And thank you once again for all of your support. If you do enjoy it, drop a like on the video, but mainly just thank you for your support. A quick thing to touch on, we finished at 120k for the game week, which is actually really good considering I was at 170k prior. In terms of game week rank, by far my second best one of the season, and not a bad time to get it at all. Mamush Screamer for an 8-pointer, and the double city defense wipeout certainly helped the rank at the end, even if it was just by a little bit. And then obviously Saka comes off the bench for Isak to record a 5-pointer as well. So going into the final game week of the season, looking forward to it, and it should be a lot of fun. Without anything else needing to be said, apart from thank you once again, let's hop into the video. I thought, considering that this was the staple piece in earlier parts of the season, it was only fitting that this was the one to start us off in the final one of the season. There are 7 candidates on screen, which are Saka, Martinelli, EVANILSON, Bowen, Salah, Watkins. I will start with the 2 Arsenal boys. Now, I differ from the general consensus somewhat, right? Because I don't think it's overly conservative, just slightly conservative. In terms of Arsenal's prospects away at some areas, I think they score at least 4. I think they're a much better, much better than side than Southampton. And I do think just because maybe their on the beat status has been somewhat confirmed following the fact that, like, you know, they're guaranteed second, and the fact that maybe Saka hasn't looked as sharp in recent weeks, and there's some talk on the timeline of him being rested, the view about Arsenal putting Southampton away and putting them to the sword isn't maybe as strong as it would have been in other versions of reality. However, I personally do think that Arsenal get the job done and get it done well. One thing with Southampton is that I feel like within their block, they can see, like within those central areas, they can see too much space. It's not as well coached, like for example, their 5-4-1 as I personally would like, and probably all of their fans as well. And then when you have that on top of the fact that the 1v1 quality you possess, at least in comparison to Arsenal, well, it isn't really there. I think they could really get hurt. You look at the game against Everton, right? You look at the chances they concede. You look at how Iliman Njai, the type of runs he makes, for example, for the goal where McNeil passes it to him. You look what Beto picks up in terms of positions and what he's able to get off. You look how much they're able to hurt Southampton, starting from the half spaces as opposed to starting to really wide areas. And I think it's just too easy to penetrate that block. Then you take Arsenal's quality as well. And for me, I think this is game where there just has to be goals, right? I don't think this will be like a repeat of the City game. Southampton really should have conceded more against Everton as well. So with that theme, I think there are goals to be had for Arsenal. However, what the thing with Martinelli is, you're not even 100% sure he starts. Let's just assume you don't get a leak for a second. You're not 100% sure he starts. Maybe it's Marino at 9, Martinelli left wing. Maybe it's Marino at 9, Trossard left wing. Maybe it's Martinelli at 9, Trossard left wing. Maybe it's Havertz at 9, Trossard left wing. Maybe it's Havertz at 9, Martinelli left wing. There's so many different combinations that are available to them. And even if he does start, he probably only gets 70 with the other options as well. So unless you have huge conviction, I personally wouldn't go there, even if I knew he was going to start at 9. More so for the expected minutes and the fact that I was more bullish on it initially if he was to start at 9, but the fact that Havertz is back now, not so much anymore. I could just see this being a game where the goals are a little bit spread, or they fall to Saka more so than other people. I personally expect him to start. I don't really see a reason for him not to. I don't think he's going to travel as a senior player to St Mary's on the last day just to get like 20-30 minutes while Ethan Nwaneri plays. I think Saka will start. He's had a good rest now in terms of like going from Newcastle to Southampton. I think there's very good prospects on offer here. The only thing that concerns me is his lack of form, and it is quite a serious lack of form. Hasn't got a return since the game against Everton, or the game in Game Week 30. Bournemouth, whatever the game was in Game Week 30. Well, it definitely wasn't Bournemouth. Fulham, the game in Game Week 30 against Fulham. And as such, combined with a little uncertainty, more so the lack of form, I can't justify it over Bowen, which is a little spoiler as to who my preference is, but you're going to work it out sooner rather than later. The one thing that I don't think they'll have an issue with comparison to City is City for a lot of the game with the way that they use like Foden and McAtee didn't really have a optimal route to breaking down the Southampton block by like spreading the block and utilizing width, whereas like with Saka, especially as that 1v1 threat, the interactions he has with White, and I honestly think even if Timber's a better player, I think White may be slightly better suited, or he just understands Saka a little bit better in combination with Odegaard as well. And I think that, for example, will be a good way to create chances and leveraging the triangular relationship that they have over there. So to conclude on the two, good for Martinelli, better for Saka, but still Percy over Jared Bowen, I couldn't justify. I don't mind the Saka shout. I don't mind it. I just think with the lack of form, it is a bit of a risk. Now we will have a look at everyone bar Jared Bowen, who we will come to last. EVANILSON, as you will find throughout this video, I really like in isolation. I really like his prospects for this game week, and I could certainly see a haul. I really could. However, given he's a forward, the limitations on the ceiling that are associated to that, in this type of game week, especially when Bowen exists, I personally wouldn't. To reiterate, however, I think the floor with him at least is really high, and I personally think the ceiling is quite decent as well. So I really like him. It's more so just because he's a forward, and I'm not so sure that, he'll bang a hat-trick. If I was that confident like I was Haaland early season, then yeah, maybe, but I'm not all the way there. But I do really like him. Semenyo, I just don't trust the haul big. I mean, I don't think he's recorded more than like an 11 or a 12 points this season, and even there, he's only got to once. More so, it's like 10's his ceiling. And even with it being Leicester, I don't necessarily trust him to get it done. And I think you want to open yourself up to the opportunity to get a big haul, especially when it comes to this captaincy. And there are better opportunities elsewhere, even if their floors are lower. For example, like you could argue that maybe, say, someone like even Mohamed Salah, with the way he's playing at the moment, has a lower floor than Semenyo when you take into account the fixture. But ceiling, yeah, ceiling's high. And I think you want to open yourself up to that. So even though I expect Semenyo to get a return, even though I could see him scoring, I just don't think the haul will come. And as such, I wouldn't captain him. At least I really think Villa put United to the sword. I think they have a good day out. They get some goals. And when they get some goals, usually Watkins is involved. He's actually up to the third highest scoring forward. He has more points than Johan Wissa, who has been so prolific and been sublime this season, right? That's how well he's actually doing in terms of FPL. I think he's really gone under the radar in that sense and how good of an asset he actually is. Similar to EVANILSON, however, he's a forward. I also don't trust him to get that mega haul just at the moment. He's obviously done it in the past. Just at the moment, like I don't think the form's there whereby I can see him scoring like 3 or getting 3 or 4 returns for definite. I think the likelihood of him getting a big haul is higher than that of EVANILSON. I just don't trust him to get all the way there with the form at the moment. There are a couple of things I would like to discuss, and I don't want to discuss everything here and not have stuff for later in the video. I don't think Leicester are necessarily going to be the fixture that everyone else, or most do. I thought they've actually played quite well recently. Not like brilliantly, but quite well. And I can see them certainly scoring in this game, which we'll discuss in the defenders section. And as such, with that, combined with the fact that Bournemouth haven't been great, I can see just being like a 3-1 as opposed to like an absolute slapping, for example, like Palace, Villa last season when that ended 5-0 and that really was the fixture to target. And I would just hold that in the back of your mind. With Villa United, whilst I expect United to get put to the sword, I mean that more in terms of performance as opposed to like Villa scoring 4 or 5. As long as United are somewhat disciplined with their back three, it's actually pretty difficult to concede too many goals in a single game. Now, what state of mind they're going to be in, I don't think a particularly positive one. Hence why I'm expecting them to get put to the sword. And maybe Villa take the foot off it a little bit when it goes to even 2-0 and they're absolutely cruising, but definitely 3 if it gets there, of course, right? But just with the system, even though Watkins is one of the better forwards, you want to exploit it. I don't think it's the type of system where you'll see them get numerous goals put past them. And in fact, that hasn't happened once this season. And then finally, Mohamed Salah. This is really challenging because I expect him to do well personally. I think it's a pretty decent fixture, but not too well, more so for the lack of form. But the analysis, like, what am I meant to analyze? Like, Palace has just won the FA Cup. Glasner said if you beat Wolves, you can have 2 days off. Okay, so they're just in party mode right now as well. The whole of Liverpool will be in party mode because it's a title procession. I think Liverpool are on holiday again. We saw what they were like against Brighton. They didn't really care. So it's like, what am I meant to analyze? Because the usual things, I just don't think they're necessarily going to happen. For example, we could talk about, like, I don't know, pressing triggers and structure and how this match up and this interaction will fare. But realistically, I don't think either team will be like too overly bothered. They won't exactly be like the best prepared they've been either. And I think it will just turn into like maybe at times a game which really lacks tempo and maybe just a game of like a few moments and a bit of luck. So I'm actually not going to overanalyze it or analyze it, to be honest, much at all. because I just think it's really difficult to know like the effort level of the team. Usually, like there are many variables which are held constant, right? Like you know roughly what the system's going to be. You know you're going to get 100% effort level. You know when like someone else is, like two people at their best, how the interaction's going to fare. But if a worse player is deciding, okay, you know what, on the day I feel really good, I haven't been drinking too much, I'll be at 100%, and Salah's like, nah, I'll be like 50. Just as an example, all of a sudden it's very difficult to interpret. I personally think he'll do all right. I just don't think he'll haul huge. But I do think there's a return for him. Yeah, and even a goal maybe. As it says below the paragraph about the candidates, for me there is only one tier 1 option this week, and that is Jarrod Bowen himself. Now, firstly, his form and the quality of the player interacting with the Ipswich side I've seen defensively as of late is not only a good justification for the armband, as it says on screen, but also a good justification, in my opinion, of the fact that his ceiling is probably slightly higher than it has been in other games. He's had a decent ceiling in other games, I just don't think he's reached it, but here I really think it's on offer. One thing I've noticed with this Ipswich side defensively is something similar to Southampton, is that the lack of like 1v1 defensive quality combined with a lack of athleticism and aggression and physicality, particularly from their midfield, means that when you get inside the block, you can certainly hurt them in ways that you can't hurt other sides. But also, due to that, you're going to make chances in the game, almost definitely, every game, and at least a couple big chances. And then when you think about the form of Jarrod Bowen, the quality of Jarrod Bowen, the fact that he can generate opportunities for himself from wide areas when he comes inside, because he's so good at doing that. And I mean really wide areas and coming all the way inside, because he just can. And also when he's in those more central areas, when he's in the half space, he has so many routes to point himself in terms of being able to manipulate space, making a yard for himself, movement, his intelligence to make something, so on and so on. I really do think that this is the game where the floor is very healthy, but there's also a healthy ceiling. And I can see himself picking up at least a couple big chances in this game to return. Whether that be 2 assists, yeah, potentially. But for him to walk away from this game without, I'd say, 1.5 good chances to score, I think is somewhat unlikely. So for me, I really, really like it. I could see him doing really well in this game, and maybe even better. And as such, for me, this is not an easy pick, but a bit of an easy pick. Yeah, I just have to go Jarrod Bowen. There's not too much more to say as well. I think the factor of like Ipswich being their last game in the league, for now at least at home, and then West Ham don't have much to play for, is a narrative I understand. But I just think in terms of the quality here, there is the necessary disparity, at least where it comes to Bowen, whereby like the ceiling and the floor is really healthy, and I just can't pass that up, where I don't think the ceiling is super present for pretty much anyone else in this capacity. Should you be selling Alexander Isak? Well, for this slide, let's assume A, that from the press conference, you gain no accurate knowledge. Eddie Howe is probably going to lie to you anyway. B, you don't know if he turns up to the ground or not. You get no leak in terms of that. And then you also don't get a leak as to whether he starts or he's benched or he's not in the squad. The 1 minute price is deadline. You have to make a decision. What do you do? Well, for me personally, I would sell him. I think the fact that he misses the game against Arsenal is a huge, huge, huge deal. I mean, it's a huge game, right? I think he plays under many circumstances. I mean, there's reports that he needs surgery at the end of the season. He's going to have it, right? So that means he's been playing all of these games through injury anyway. But it was so bad this time that for the biggest game, arguably the biggest game, he couldn't roll out for it. So in a week, is he going to get that much better when it's been such an ongoing issue and he'd have to train and he's still going to put his body under a certain amount of load? No, probably not. Like, it might get a bit better and he might just go over the line. But even if he does, I think that puts ceiling limitations on him as opposed to 17. Maybe he goes to 13. And the likelihood of him hitting that, especially in comparison to what we've seen recently and the fact that that bodes well for him not hauling. Like, even if he does start then, I think it's like not the same Isak, and I just don't. Well, with all of these factors going on. He also went for a scan. Now, I know that's a precautionary measure. I know that's a measure that's a necessity in these circumstances just to find out where he is. But like, the fact that he has to go for a scan is not really great in the first place. And it is only a week turnaround, right, for a clearly somewhat serious injury. So I don't expect him to start, even though it's pretty much a must-win game for them. No, it is a must-win, because I think Villa will win, and I personally think we're going to get the job done as well. And if that happens, then they get dumped out the Champions League spots if they don't win. I still personally just don't think he'll be fit enough to start. Now, who would you sell him for if that is the case? For me, EVANILSON, and it's only EVANILSON. I really don't like any of the other forward options. I'm not overly convinced about Johan Wissa this week. I think Wolves could do an okay job in that game. And outside of him, like, where would you go, right? If it's not EVANILSON. And EVANILSON I discussed more in the captaincy section. If not him, If you don't own Watkins, yeah, I like that a lot. And there's one reason I didn't put him in the same section or category as EVANILSON is. On the fixture to an extent, but two, I imagine most of you own him. But if you don't, then yeah, I think this is cool. And if not there, then I think Marmoush could also do quite well. I think he looked quite sharp against Bournemouth, and had his teammates done a little bit of a better job just in certain situations when it comes to decisions, more so than accuracy decisions, I think you could have seen a haul. But outside of that, I don't really like anyone. I don't really like Chris Wood. I know he's somewhat popular, but for me, it's EVANILSON, it's Watkins, maybe it's Marmoush, but it's not anyone else, including Johan Wissa for this particular game week. Should you be selling William Saliba, and who are the best defenders to buy in any case? I think you should be selling William Saliba and making a defensive transfer if you have a certain quality of attack. For example, let's say Morgan Rogers is your 7th attacker. Yeah, that's cool. If you've already got 7 attackers where Rogers is the worst, by all means go and make a defensive transfer, because your attack's good enough. Like, it really is. Like, Rogers is a very, very, very healthy 7th attacker for this game week, right? I've already spoken about how I think Villa would do well at Old Trafford, and he's obviously a very good player, done magnificently well as an asset this year, and there's no reason that shouldn't continue to some extent in the final game of the season. So I think in those cases, yeah, but if not, if there's some opportunity to upgrade your attack and your defense is already decent, and by all means just go and do the opposite. I think there's also not too many opportunities in the defense outside of the Arsenal boys, so if it's not going to be them, then I wouldn't, right? But who would I go for? Number one, Ben White. I think the relationships he has with Odegaard and Saka as a trio on that right-hand side is just very good. And his ability to generate assists and even get a goal from open play from a variety of different situations is very good as well. So I would personally go there. By a mile, I would go there. I don't think there's anything that comes even close, especially when you take into account the likelihood of a clean sheet. If not him, Calafiori, don't get the open play threat, but you do get the set piece threat, and you also get the same chance of a clean sheet, right? Fairly simple. If not them, then ideally no one. Like, I just go there. But if not them, I think Fabian Schär's okay. He's got a decent chance of attacking returns usually, but given they're mainly through set pieces, and Everton obviously are a very difficult side to score against from that route, that's not great. But I think the clean sheet potential is decent. Perkins is someone who will be very popular amongst a lot of people, but for me, not so much. I think Leicester score. I think they've been okay as of late, as I've expressed. I think Vardy's a decent matchup for these guys. I think they've got enough going forward to cause them problems when they play in a slightly freer manner. Like, for example, they have enough talent. They're slightly different to, like, for example, the likes of Southampton in that sense. And I don't think they're going to be the slam dunk that maybe it appears to be on the FDR. So for me, I would personally stay clear of Kirkhead. Just try and focus on the Arsenal guys. And if not them, then honestly, I'd be happy enough just to make my transfer in the attacking departments or roll it for next season. Don't know, you cannot roll for next season. Outside of them, like I said, there's not really much I like. Maybe Chelsea. Like, I think we're going to win. I think maybe we keep a clean sheet. It's just a bit of a risk, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we kept a clean sheet. Obviously, Cucurella's got a high ceiling, so something to consider there. A reoccurring theme you may have noticed within this video is that my preferences are very much aligned with players that we already own and the current template, as opposed to being the purchasable options that are available to ourselves, which is very much a different case to what we're usually used to in Game Week 38, but I guess that is just the lay of the land this time around. And as such, when it comes to this best mid section, which would usually be the most populated one in terms of options, there's not too much for me to discuss about players to go for and analyze, because I just don't like a lot of them, as I will show you, especially when it comes to the differentials. Hence why on the slide it says that I really would prioritize EVANILSON. A lot of us only have one free transfer, and in that case I really would be prioritizing EVANILSON as opposed to the mids, unless you don't own Saka or Bowen. And then I think it becomes a lot harder, especially if you don't own Bowen. But for me, Bowen and EVANILSON maybe tier 1, Saka maybe tier 2, and then maybe Salah like tier 4 as opposed to tier 3 in terms of who to bring in. But they've all been discussed throughout this video. That's just what I would say for this. Now, in terms of the other options, which people are looking to bring in, some more differential ones, the expected minutes of the Arsenal midfielders puts me off, whether that be Trossard, Marino, Rice, Martinelli, and then Odegaard's ceiling. Maybe he hits, but I just don't think he does, right? Like, he hasn't done it all. If he does hit now, it'd just be very lucky as opposed to something that's easily predictable. Kluivert only had a half of football against City. Same with the previous game as well. So I don't trust his expected minutes. Also hasn't been super prolific as of late. I don't trust Newcastle to put Everton to the sword. I do think that they're worse, considerably worse without Tarkowski, but not so much worse that a Newcastle side without Isak, on the assumption he's not there, will be able to thrash him. And the fact that Gordon, since his injury, hasn't been quite a shot, which is fair enough considering the fact that he's pretty much just come back, hasn't been long. He doesn't have Lewis Hall down his left flank, which is certainly helpful. Livramento, when he's played there, has done a good job, but overall, I think it's certainly preferable to have Lewis Hall, especially given he's left-footed. And I don't think he's been as lucky as well. I just don't think it's quite going his way. So I wouldn't go there. And then the Brighton mids, who are seemingly quite popular amongst the engaged community as well, I personally don't like them as much, which I go on to discuss in the free hit section. In my preferred free hit 38 draft, at least the one that is preferred for now, I have not got any Brighton assets. So we will discuss them first. I personally think you will see something similar to what you saw against Manchester United in the Europa League final. And congratulations to any Spurs fans on first trophy in 17 years. Huge achievement, done very well. Really respect Ange for it, in particular, and Son. So good on you. But what you noticed was a sense of positive pragmatism. And we saw that against Brentford. And every time they do that, they actually put in a fairly decent performance and they usually get a result. And I think, especially with the guys all being on the booze, he's probably not going to be like, okay, fine, just go and you employ the standard game model. You can employ that game model, and from there, just try and win the game 1-2-0, as opposed to having a really exciting affair, maybe risking an injury on the last game of the season, and then having this high risk game model as well. I do think you'll see some implementation of positive pragmatism, especially if they get an early goal. So for me, I'm not so keen on going for Brighton assets for that reason. I also think the likes of Gruda and Mitoma are not necessarily super reliable to go for, just in terms of both their ceiling and floors, and hence why they are avoided. The free hit is very much template, which isn't great because you want a free hit 38 to exploit all the opportunities that other people can't. But I've got double Arsenal defense, White, Calafiori, huge upside there, paired with Saka. Makes sense given what I've said in this video. Bowen there makes sense, right? Watkins, EVANILSON, Salah, Semenyo, all discussed in this video. I think Mbeumo is just super high ceiling, relatively high floor for this game. I just don't think it's as good maybe as usual. I'm super confident after Brentford's last result, and the fact that European football is probably slipping away right now. But he's still Mbeumo. I don't think there's a reason to bet against when there are not so many attractive options on display. Konsa, because I just think that they've been really good defensively. Box threat is immense, especially for someone of his frame. No, he's a small guy, but he's just not the biggest guy in the world. And yeah, I think the defense has been so good. United's attack has been poor. Box threat. I've got Arion Ole in goal. I fancy West Ham against Ipswich, hence why I've gone for him. If not him, I guess you could maybe go Nick Pope. But outside of that, probably not looking too far. Maybe Kepa as well, but I think Bournemouth are going to concede. So yeah, that's why my free hit is what it is. I think a lot of it has been discussed throughout the video. Very template in terms of the options. A lot of high EO options. What can you do when it just, I guess, presents it to you in that manner? And that is all she wrote for the final EYN of the 2024-2025 season, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you've enjoyed all the EYNs throughout this season. I very much look forward to welcoming you back for a Game Week 1 version of this in August. But until then, I can only see you next in the team selection. That will be out today or tomorrow, depending on when you're watching this. But aside from that, have a wonderful day in the meantime. Thank you for all your support. Drop a like on the video if you haven't already, and subscribe if you have not already. Thousands if you have not who watch regularly. But like I said, have a wonderful day, and I shall see you very soon. Goodbye.